Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Electro Live, where the process here is to kind of learn about up and coming new artists, also some of the veterans, people that have been in the business a long time, and pay homage to those folks who shape the culture and really influence the world we live in with their music. This is pertaining to hip hop music, electro music, dance music in general. It's my passion. So I have the opportunity to speak to an artist I was just introduced to not long ago. This is Tombstone Da Deadman. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, man. I just want to let you know, I was introduced to you and then turned on to your music. I went and checked it out. I loved it. I love the content.
Appreciate that.
I can really resonate with the things you talk about, your messages, and I just wanted to share it with my audience and let them know that you exist, that they can find your music, they can and just promote what you're doing, because I'm a big believer. You got a #1 fan right here.
Appreciate that.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And if you will, just introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. As Scott just said, my stage name is Tombstone Da Deadman. I've been a hip hop recording artist for 40 years. And the first introduction I had to a wider audience was because of a channel I started on YouTube called Rational Warrior, the Rational Warrior channel. On this channel, I utilized that platform to talk about a lot of the misgivings that I had about religious dogma, theism in general, and just to attack things that weren't particularly skeptical about the nature of reality and really things in general. But it started with religion, and what wound up happening was some influential YouTubers took note of some music that I put up. This particular music had an atheist theme to it. So when they heard the song, one of the YouTubers, Dark Matter 2525, when he heard the song, he contacted me because he wanted to use it as background music for a video he was doing. And once he did that, that's when I got a deluge of people coming to the channel. And this had to be, I want to say 10, 11 years ago when this happened, right? Yeah. So, and there was a bunch of other YouTubers too, Coffee with Claire, quite a few other YouTubers that heard the music and shared it on their channels. And that's really what got me kind of known throughout that community. And so much so that when the first Reason rally was taking place, I got contacted to perform in 2012. And once I did that, it just like opened up. After that, it just opened up. And since then, that's funny. The funny thing about that is the type of music that I do, a lot of times it gets misconstrued, because when a lot of people were introduced to me, it was because of my first album, Rise of the Infidel, which was all atheism all the time. Thing is, though, I wasn't always an atheist. And for much of the time I've been a recording artist, I was a believer, right? So I had a whole bunch of other music, but I'd never put together, I put together one album in that whole time. And that didn't have really anything to do with atheism at all. So I dropped the Rise of the Infidel album, and that went kind of crazy. And after that, I have not dropped an atheist album since. And I have like 9 albums to my credit on my discography. And yet and still, when people introduce me, they introduce me as the atheist rapper. I like to say, no, I'm a rapper that happens to be an atheist, and I'm not afraid to talk about it.
Oh,
You
that's
know.
interesting. Yeah. So, and when you were recording before you were
Mhm,
an atheist,
mhm.
the content, what was it, religious based, or was it um just I don't know how to say
Okay,
it.
so so let me help you out. So
Mhm.
I come from Baltimore, Maryland, right?
Mhm.
I grew up on the west side of Baltimore. Those of you that may have watched The Wire, so from
Mhm.
around
Yeah,
that
I'm
area. I come from around
very
that area.
familiar with that area. Yeah.
I come from
Mhm.
around that area, right? So for me, you gotta remember, I've been doing this so long that I have been in every stage of hip hop. When hip hop
Mhm.
first came out, and it had really just transported the music, not the culture, down to Baltimore early on. I
Mhm.
heard it, I liked it, it was cool, but I wasn't really interested in doing it. I was young, but the culture transported afterwards.
Mhm.
And before you know it, you had people in Baltimore breakdancing, DJing, graffiti art, and rapping. I
Mhm.
started rapping on a dare because a friend of mine who was rapping at the time, didn't think that I could do it. And that's when I started doing it. I just really wanted to be a part of the culture, right? The culture that was a part of that. So whatever was the main talking points or themes in the culture in each phase, that's what I was rapping about, right? So
Mhm.
early on, it was more about being braggadocious, right? Talking
Mhm.
about your clothes,
Lyrical
jewelry, and
skills and
lyrical
yeah,
skills and all that,
fashion. Mhm.
fashion, all that. So I rapped about that. Then when the tide changed and they started talking, it was more about your environment, where you come from, the stuff that you was
Mhm.
doing. Well, I come from Baltimore, Maryland.
Mhm.
So I started talking about the same. I was in a gang. I'm
Mm.
doing that type of rap, right? And
Mhm.
eventually I was really influenced by KRS-One
Mhm. Conscious.
because
Mhm.
yeah, because he like when I first heard him, I realized, oh, we can rap about other stuff. We don't have to just rap about this, right? So it made
Mhm.
me want to pay more attention to things outside of my environment, the world, and stuff that was happening outside my environment. Because something Chuck D said, he said that rappers rap about what they know. So if you
Mhm.
don't know much, you're not going to rap about much, right?
Mm.
So these were very influential things for me, and I started to have this curiosity about the world, not just around me, but even other people's experiences, history,
Mhm.
politics, different things like that. To be honest, the first atheist rap that I did was years and years ago when I was in this group called the Villains with my
Mm.
friend Corey, and
Mhm.
both of us were not believers. We weren't believers,
Mm.
and we did this one song about that. And that was the only time I had touched on that topic at all. But as years have gone by, um, when that became like that conversation was kind of spreading out wide. Sam Hirsch dropped his book. This conversation was starting to get, really, really big and prevalent. And I decided to talk about it on the channel. I said, well, the theme of this channel, I'm talking about these religious conversations. I'll do some music about it. And I put the music up, and it just happened that way. And before then, um, I had a little notoriety locally,
Mhm.
but the moment I start tackling that conversation there, now globally, I have a fan base that's global from tackling that conversation, because not many rappers were talking about. Matter of fact, I can't think of any. And I was introduced to Graydon Square through my fans, and he was introduced to me through his fans, and that's how we wind up meeting. But before Graydon, I didn't know of any other rapper that was talking about that stuff.
Mhm.
And
Right.
anyway, you know,
And we were talking about that earlier, even before we launched the interview just now, is that
mhm,
in in black culture, and I have, part of my family
right.
is African American, and they'll tell me all the time, like, look, man, one thing we black people don't do. We don't do Republican and we don't do atheism. All right. We don't do those things.
Mm,
And it's like, and I never really understood, like, I don't like that mentality, because it's like black people are not a monolith, man.
No.
Like no one is. Like
No.
a culture is imagination. It's imaginary bullshit. As far as I'm concerned, like we are all individuals, and this is what I like about your music and your message and your story so far, is that you are a thinker and you're venturing outside of the box.
Yes.
That is perfect, you know. And some folks, like, you know, Wu-Tang Clan, you know, people, members of the Wu-Tang Clan were into the mathematics and, you know, their gods and
Nation of Gods and Earth, 5%. I was one of those at one point too. I went through the whole gambit, and this is the reason why I think a lot of the times people that weren't religious, they were never religious, they don't really understand it. Like I don't have as big of an issue as long as people aren't trying to legislate their religion to make everybody have to follow the principles of it by corrupting the political system, and in order to do that. I don't have a problem with it, but one of my biggest issues is beliefs inform actions. So if you really believe this stuff, it's only a matter of time before you act on a lot of it. And sometimes that could be, in the most extreme cases, the form of people committing violent acts because of it. But even in the more subtle, the less violent stuff, like you can negatively affect people's lives based off of the things that you accept to be true. And for the record, look, I'm also very cognizant of culture, because while it is something that humans developed over time, it's one of those things where it becomes an operating system, right? So because of that, very real consequences come from these cultures. And I tend to respect people's cultures up until like I can respect the culture without respecting certain elements of the culture. Because I get a classic example what I mean. Being African American, there are a lot of things that I took from growing up from my family members, neighbors, and stuff like that, that are specific to the African American experience. That I love that. I love it. There are other things that are also specific to the African American experience. Yeah, not so much. Right. So because of that, I have to learn that not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Right. Like there are things that are absolutely, even growing up in the impoverished area that I grew up in, that I had good times. There are good nostalgic memories that I have about living around that time. I won't give away any of those lessons for nothing in the world, because I learned from that. And when I was able to do better and be in a better situation, those lessons help. Now, sometimes the PTSD from back then still affects me. Case in point, when I moved out into the county, Laurel, Maryland, I still had the Baltimore City operating system going. So many times when I would go out to walk and I had my headphones on, where I come from, if somebody's running, they're either running from the police, running to do something to you, or running from something that's dangerous that you need to pay attention to, because you might need to run too. In this area, people jog. Jogging. I can't tell you how many times I've had these awkward situations where my operating system is I'm feeling or hearing footsteps coming behind me, and I turn around and get on my square, because I think that's happened a lot. Another situation, my son, him and his friends would come over, and they'd have their bikes, right? And they would come over and play video games in the house all day long and leave their bikes outside. And the whole day, I'm going, looking out the window, checking, I've got the window checking. And my wife says to me, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, Malik and his friends, they left their bikes sitting out there and somebody could take them." She's like, "Sweetie, you're not in Baltimore. No one's going to take their bikes." So it took a while to like adjust, right?
I understand. I understand that 100%, man.
Yeah.
You know, I've had my bike stolen as a kid, you know, just even loaning somebody my bike. Like
Same.
somebody say, hey, hey man, let me borrow your bike, man. I just need to run up here or whatever. And I won't see it all day long. And people steal your stuff, man. And big time confrontations come out about
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
I was just talking to a hip hop historian I kind of grew up with in Richmond, Virginia. And I was telling him before I moved up there, I was living down here in Florida where I'm at now. And I
Right.
lived in a very urban area at that time. And I used to make, you know, mixtapes, like real mixtapes, like the pause mixes and stuff
Oh, okay.
before the turntables. And I was in high school, so I would sell them and they would distribute around school, you know.
Nice.
But some people would buy those tapes and then start reselling them, or they would take some of my tapes out of my bag or whatever and sell them. And man, it would be like confrontation. So it was like I was always geared towards that sort of negative expectation.
That's a good
of
way
people
to get beat up.
get beat up. Yeah, it'd be so many school fights.
Yeah.
Another thing, my son called me. My son is back in California, and my son lives in Orange County, California. So he has no clue, like the kind of lifestyle that any place that I've lived that is remotely urban or different. He has no clue. He has no reference, and he's a mixed kid. So he's a black kid. So in Orange County, though, he's around mainly just white kids and wealthy kids and stuff like that. And that's cool. But he came down last summer to be with me. And, you know, and we were going around like seeing my uncles and people down here, you know, they're African Americans and we're in like in the hood, you know, and he's like scared. And then we went to a restaurant, like just a little fat burger restaurant, you know, neighborhood joint, man. And people were talking real loud, and that's just how it is, you know. People talk very down here in the South. People talk very loud and boisterous, and and he was literally
used to that.
He was scared. He thought something was gonna
pop off. Yeah,
he was like, "Oh my God, Dad, we need to get out of here. These people are screaming and yelling." I'm like, "They're not yelling. They're just having a conversation." He's like, "Yeah, it's like, yeah, but they're cussing and yelling and talking.
That's how we talk.
Aggressive. Yeah, it's like that's how it is, man." So yeah, you get programmed into your environment, you know, and it's just normal, you know. And
it's normal to do. And one of the things that we have to be able to parse the things that are harmless about that with the things that aren't. And you know, especially I'm 52. Getting to 52 has been a chore. I have so many friends, they're not here now. They're not here. Right. I lost one of my best friends. The first time I lost one of them, I was in the 6th grade, going into the 7th grade. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that I'm one of the lucky ones. And I don't want to squander any of that. So I had to learn there are things about my upbringing that are absolutely positive, that give me flavor. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But there's also things about that upbringing that I absolutely could not be now. I couldn't practice any of that stuff now. And I said this on one of the my podcasts a few weeks ago. If I thought the same at 52 the way I thought at 22, there's a problem. There's a problem. So a lot of the times, being, you know, in doing this music thing, most of the people that I do this music thing with, I'm twice their age. Right? I'm twice their age. Some of the things that they involve themselves with, to not come off preachy to them, but at the same time, I feel like it's my responsibility to say to them, bro, I've been there. It's a road to nowhere. I've been locked up. It's a road to nowhere. I've had people trying to kill me for an entire summer because of things that I did. Bro, it's not, it doesn't give you anything. You get nothing out of it. If anything, it takes things from you. You know, so these are things that you just got to learn how to parse from the positive stuff. Next up, like you got to learn it.
Yeah, that's so true, man. Because the younger generation, man, they are just into the internet, the social media. They're into what they scroll on their phones and what seems to be the message in social media, which is a lot of you could call it fake news, especially like towards like what defines a person and how you should and ought to identify yourself with, even my son, I can see it now. Like when he spent the summer here, and I was talking to his mom the other day, and she was like, "Yeah, he's still going on about, he was in the hood and he was, he saw some shootings and he saw some bad things going on, and he's telling all his." And I was teasing him, and she was saying I was teasing him. I was saying, "Oh, so you got street cred now or whatever?" And it's like, and, and I got on the phone like, "Look, I got out of that area, that was where I had to live when I first moved here, and I got out, and I'm like, I wasn't there for any reason, and I didn't even want to bring you into that neighborhood, and there's nothing positive there. I didn't interact with any, like I stayed to myself. I stayed out because someone like me will probably get robbed or killed walking around in a place like that. So I don't have any pride in that, and neither should you, son. Like it's okay that you saw it, you experienced it, but it's not part of you. You have nothing to do with
and
that.
It's not something that you one of the things the internet did was it brought people close together. It allowed people to at least get a window into the experience of people from across the world, across the city, across the country, whatever. But it also sensationalized, it helped sensationalize a lot of negative stuff that I feel like we're going to pay for that. Like as a society, we're going to pay for that. The idea that just because you see something on the internet that makes it so, the way people are able to curate their imagery online and have you think they're living these incredible lives or whatever, we're gonna pay for that psychologically, and some psychologists think that we already are starting to pay for some of that stuff. And I gotta say, before the internet, I only had a little bit of local notoriety. After the internet, I was able to expand my brand. Also, there are so many things I learned just from having this tool. It's a lot of great things you can do with this powerful tool, but it's like any other thing. Depends on the person using it, what their purpose is, and what their motivation is. And I tell you, sometimes I think it's more trouble than it's worth.
True.
I really do. And but you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
True.
It's here now. And it's something that we have to deal with. Like me personally, I'm planning on moving out of the country when I retire. So this is one of the good things about the internet. I still will be able to conduct my business and everything that I do living someplace else because it's mostly online. Right.
That's it.
So that's a great thing. But what's not a great thing is when, we see certain narratives, like lies, flat out, just things that are just factually, objectively wrong, quickly spread. And my grandfather told me years ago, he said, a lie will get around the world. We're halfway around the world before the truth gets started. This is before the internet.
Yeah.
This is before the
wisdom.
Internet.
That's just wisdom, man.
Right. So you can imagine if that was so then, he told me this in the 80s. If that was true then, just imagine what it is now. Just imagine what it is now. And we don't have to really imagine, we see it.
It's like almost like a law, man. It's like you see how people always drive towards the negative anyways. They like the negative stories. They like the shock value. That's why it works. That's why they sell it. That's why we have horror movies and crime movies and drama. And the same thing with music, the same thing with all kinds of shit out here, man. And
Absolutely.
so I can see it. One thing I did want to do, I wanted to play one of your tracks here, so people kind of understand what we're talking about as far as your music goes. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen, add this to the stream, and give people a chance to hear some of your tracks. So let's do that real quick.
Okay.
And can you hear everything okay, though?
I can.
Okay, perfect.
My tolerance for ignorance is non-existent. I resist it, because faith-based claims can't go the distance. You either gonna stand up for reality or surrender to the fantasy. But either way, don't care if people mad at me. My criticism's so much bigger than religion. It's about the fact that they're lacking in total skepticism. These days it kinda seems like being skeptic is a negative. So my position is to face a type of mental sedative. The type of things I rap about are really not cerebral. There's just an overabundance of really stupid people who get offended when I challenge all that sacred shit. Fussing, complaining, but then abstain from debating it. They want me suppressed, so they try to say that I'm obsessed. That knee-jerk reaction whenever they hear my views expressed. Some other ones that ain't blind sit on the sidelines, too scared to offend, but then defend all those dumb lies. You really think these stairs see you in a different light because you're the type that's passive, you're favorable inside their sight? You really think they think that you are not alike, and that they don't imagine you burning hot in the afterlife? To them, you're just a sacrilegious blasphemy, a tragedy, a heathen who doesn't respect his holy majesty. My contention, you're respected on condition that you never contradict them or speak against their convictions. So this is where I'm making my stand, and now regardless who don't like it or how they get mad, see why the rest of y'all capitulate and go with the plan. I'll be beating on this wall until I'm breaking my hand. So listen while I state official policy. No matter how I'm threatened with hell, they never silence me. I know that you don't see this as imperative, but I refuse to lose and let the stupid frame the narrative. Skeptic.
Ooh, man, I love that song. That was the first one I heard. Wow. And I just love that track. That was the one that I was listening to. I love that track.
Wow. It's I did that actually. The purpose of that that song, most of the music that I write comes from conversations that I had outside stimulus, things that I see in the news, things that are going on just with me. You could basically take a snapshot of my life at any given time, and that album, whatever I'm going through, what I'm thinking, it's on that album. I had a conversation with some atheists that really surprised me. And it's when I realized that every atheist is not a skeptic.
Absolutely.
And they're skeptical about that specific question. But when it comes to other things, then not so much. And when I purposely constructed the rhyme to draw people in, especially people from our community, the atheist community, in. Yeah, they go, yes, that's how these theists think. And then in the second verse, I addressed them. They need to listen to that, because and over time, that song is old. That's an old song of mine. Over time, it has continued to reaffirm itself with certain conversations I have with people. And I realized that for me, I recognize that I have biases. To me, that's part of being able to set them aside. If you don't recognize that they're there, how can you then account for them in the process when it comes to you analyzing information or data? You have to acknowledge that the bias is there first and go, okay, why do I question yourself? Why do I think that? That's all you have to do. Why do I think that? And I think if more people did that and actually did the work, because that's the other thing that bothers me, where a lot of people think that it's a one-time thing. You took this pill, and now all of a sudden you're king skeptic. No, this is an ongoing thing forever. I still find myself falling into certain lines of reasoning based off of things that have no data to support it. The difference is I catch myself like, wait a minute, let me back up a little bit. How do I know this is true? Like, these are
epistemology.
These are things that I feel that not enough people do. And that's why it's really easy for them to buy anything. Like they will buy anything, especially if there's a course of people around it parroting the same thing, and they get in this ideological vacuum or bubble, right? And everyone in that bubble is saying the same thing, have the same, near the same positions, all of this other stuff, and then it's never challenged or questioned. They don't have to put that to the test with somebody that has a different viewpoint than they do, because they're in this bubble. But you can really do a lot of that stuff on your own if you just take half a second to go, why do I think that's true? Yeah, just that half second.
Just that little thought. And then you have to have some gumption. You got to have some pride in yourself and dignity. Like, the problem is, I think, like, just looking at my own experience back when I was starting to question a lot of things, is I would say, well, I think about this, and yeah, I can see how this don't really make sense in my own mind. But then peer pressure is a bitch, right? So you got all these people, and then you're like, well, I have to make a decision. Am I going to go with what I know doesn't make sense, or am I just going to play along? And then you want to feel like I'm not wrong. So you want to feel like, well, if I'm going to go ahead and just fall in with the peer pressure, then I better come up with ways of thinking to accept it. Like, push that stuff aside and think of alternate facts. Or in other
words, inoculate yourself. That is one of the other issues that I find too, where people will inoculate themselves from new data. And that's the one thing with me. Like, I have to recognize that I'm human. And a certain humans we did not develop to be skeptical. That did not help us during our evolutionary development. For instance, if there's a noise in the bushes over there, it doesn't behoove me to go wait for me to get all the data before I decide to run. No, that could be something that's going to eat me. I'm out of here now. I'm going to err on the side of fear, err on the side of preservation of life. That rewarded us. So humans, as a rule, I find us not to be all as critically thinking as we like to assume that we are.
Of course.
So it's something we have to work on. This is a constant work. People used to mistake my Rational Warrior channel for me being someone who was saying, I am the king of rationality. No, I'm fighting irrationality from without and within. And that's a constant battle that does not stop just because you read a Christopher Hitchens book. That battle does not stop just because you read whatever you read or watch whatever YouTube video or collection of a playlist or listen to a podcast. No, this is a constant everyday thing that you have to do. And I think if more people saw it that way, we would have less people jumping out of the window over things that we find out later are demonstrably false.
Yeah. Type 1 and type 2 errors, like because like you said, I think it's very true that if you just assume the bushes are rustling because there's possibly a lion back there or an evil spirit, you're going to run away, and those people are going to survive over time. You know? And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's obviously how people operate. They call them heuristics. It's like little shortcuts in our thinking. And I use them all the time because I couldn't really make a decision at all if I didn't.
If you didn't.
At any point in time, you're always in that situation where, look, I got to make a decision right now. I ain't got time to really think this over. And, and it's either going to be right or wrong. But I don't have to use those kind of heuristics when I think of certain things, like the information I get off the internet or the questions about existence or other things. I don't have to use those shortcuts, but I'm so used to it.
Big questions too, by the way. This is the other thing I think people don't realize. This is not, well, Scott, what are you going to have for dinner tonight? These are big questions that even people who spend their entire lives focused on these questions and looking at the data and all of that stuff, they still have questions and they're arguing back and forth. So I think some of the expectation I see from some people is that we're just supposed to be able to understand all of these things right in a way. There are some things we're never going to get in our lifetime. We're not going to get it. And we got to learn to be cool with that. This is the problem what I have with religion.
Mm-hmm.
Religion has trained people that there is a answer for a lot of these big questions, and it's contained within this book or these books.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the questions you guys are asking about the nature of reality, about the origins of this universe, some of these are big questions. And if you think that they're all going to be contained in this book that was written 5,000 years ago, several books, by the way, compiled, written 5,000 years ago, I don't know how I can help you with that. The reality is new data will come out. And we typically, as humans, we have 5 senses. That's how we initially grab data. As our tools of observation grew and got better, we started seeing things that our senses could not detect, but were there, right? So certain things that we thought was true about the nature of our reality turned out not to be. The issue we have, especially now in today's society, is that when new data comes out, our impulse is to go, oh, they were lying to us at first. No, that was the best current evidence for what we had at the time. And now this new data we acquired because we're still looking into all of these things, and we developed new tools of observation, and we learned this new data. So turns out we got to be flexible enough to accept new data.
That's right.
and a lot of times people aren't. Oh, it must not be true because, well, last month they said, okay, they learned something new. Like they learned something new.
You know, I was looking at on YouTube, and I ran across this. He's actually an atheist, but he's also a mystic, which is really funny. But and I guess he defines mystic in different ways than maybe what folks get. Yeah. So, anyways, he's an atheist. He's an agnostic atheist, and he's always talking to people at and it's huge following. But one of the things he says that and I think he was in a debate with a Jewish person, a rabbi or somebody, and he was saying, but you're an atheist, and what do you justify your atheism, And so the mystic said, well, my own experience justifies my not knowing, because I experience not knowing. And if I don't know, then why would I come out here and lie to you and say I know something? Right. He says this is just as simple as that. And that's from looking within myself and just understanding I don't know the greater reality.
Yeah.
And so the guy was like, yeah, but it sounds like you're creating a blind spot for yourself. It's almost like you take pride in not knowing. It's almost like you're trying to belittle those who do know from their experience by you just, you're creating a blind spot. And he goes, no, actually what I'm doing is I'm removing the blind spot. Like he says, you guys who say you know everything,
that's the blind spot. That's the blind spot.
He goes, if you can remove that problem, maybe you can learn something. He says, because if we know everything, then what's the point in even learning or question? Then there's no question. What are we sitting here talking about? You've already got the answer. So let's just go home. It's all done, right?
Right. All your work is done.
Yeah.
and a lot of times with that, these people that say they know all this stuff refuse to show their work. Like, how did you reach this conclusion? Because to me, that's far more interesting than the conclusion itself most of the time. If a person tells me that they are, name any religion you can think of, I'm going to say to them, that's interesting. So how did you arrive to the conclusion that these things, and you could do one by one if you want, these things, these principles in your religion, how did you arrive to that? Because therein you'll find the problem. You'll find the issue right there. And typically, what I have found in my just personal dealings with people like that is that when you hit them with that, a lot of them don't really have a good answer. And I came to the conclusion that a lot of times when people get upset with you, when you question certain tenets in their religion, they're not really defending their religion. They're defending their grandmother because grandma believed it. And they got good memories about their grandmother. Every time they think about it, they smell pumpkin pie. She's in the kitchen humming her songs to Jesus, and she lived a good life. She probably was a great person, and she passed away, or she's still there, and you still, the emotional connection to that. The second person you're defending is yourself. Because when the guy said, when he asked the mystic / atheist dude, how do you justify your atheism? That word itself, justify, should tell anybody and everybody how that other guy thinks. Justify, defend yourself. Like, how dare you? like, how dare you? Like that to me, you find anything that you want to know about the motivations and how they think about certain things by the terms that they use when they're speaking to you about it.
It exposes, like, even throughout that debate, you know, he felt attacked, like, you know, how, you know, you arrogantly, like, all these words, like, you know, it almost, to me, it reveals like people's neediness, people's psychological neediness and their unintelligence, you know, unfortunately. Like, if you know, there's a guy named Pine Creek Doug who's on YouTube. He's an atheist, and he has a strategy for kind of diffusing that situation. And I used it a lot, and it's called the flying man. And basically what it is if he gets into these religious discussions and they're trying to talk about justification and why you're an atheist, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of turns around and he goes, okay, so you believe as a Christian, let's take, for example, a Christian, like the core tenet of Christianity is what? That Jesus is God and he was resurrected.
He died for your sins and
for your sins. Okay. So his question is, so my problem is I don't have a reason to believe that. And so then we're at the table now talking about reasons for belief, right?
That's right.
So he goes, so let's diffuse it. Let's get Jesus off the table because you're emotional about Jesus. You're gonna, you know, you're not trying to hear it. You know, you're not trying to. I understand that you're not trying to hear it. So let's talk about something we both can agree isn't true.
Yeah.
So he'll say, so what if I told you that I found a book in the desert and me and a friend, we opened it up and it said, you know, 1,000 years ago, this man, my great-great-great-great-grandfather, he flew across the Grand Canyon unaided. You know, there were no airplanes back then. He just flew like a damn bird, right? Would you believe it? And the guy's like, oh, of course not. Because, okay, then we're the same. Let's go to the second part. What if I told you, we flipped the paper, and it said there were 500 witnesses that saw this happen? Would you believe it? No, of course not. Okay, we're still the same. Let's look at it. There's all these prophecies that talks about the flying man was going to come along and do what he did. Would you believe it? Oh, of course not. Okay, we're still the same. So you go through this whole thing, and it's all comparative to the gospel account to the T.
Yeah.
And whatever the guy comes up with, yeah, but you know, maybe there's something in the gospels that really rings true to him. Like, yeah, but did they die for this belief or something like that, right? Like, you know, the difference is in the New Testament, they died for the belief. Okay, great. Did I also tell you when you flip the paper, it says that so many people died for the belief? Would you believe it? Oh, of course not. It's like, well, what are we talking about? Like, so what is the real reason? Can we get to the real reason?
He confronted him with this with cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is jarring. It can be really jarring, right? So these ideas, these sets of ideas that you have, and you stand 10 toes down on, then you're confronted with the cognitive dissonance. And now a thoughtful person who was ready, developmentally wise, ready to confront that cognitive dissonance is going to be jarred to the point that they're going to start questioning things. Because that is clearly a sore spot. You know how you jam your finger in the door, and for the rest of that day it's sensitive, and you go to pick it up, something up, and it hurt. That's what that is in their mind. Because every time that conversation comes up, for as long as that experience, that conversation that they had with the other person is still fresh in their mind, that's right. Because that cognitive dissonance is still in there. They're gonna have to confront it to heal it. You're gonna have to confront it to heal it. And if you try to put it aside, eventually you're gonna run into somebody else who's gonna hit you with the same thing, and that wound's gonna be fresh all over again. And you have not developed a scar or a callus over it to keep moving. You got to confront the cognitive dissonance. You have to.
You got to, man.
I like that. That's pretty amazing, right? That's a pretty amazing way to do that.
Yeah, I thought so. And I see it works. Like when I talk to people at work or I talk to different people, it's like when confronted with it, it's really interesting just to see the answers. Like some people will screw up and they immediately know they screwed up when they say this. They'll say, well, like I said, all those things you said would not convince me of the flying man. But if you look at the Gospels, it's when you put all that stuff together, it increases the odds, you know. Oh, okay. So if we put all this together for the flying man,
does it increase the odds?
Oh, yeah, that doesn't make sense. So, you know, it's like they already know it don't make sense. That's the funny thing about the thought experiment is that you already know it doesn't make, and you already know it's ridiculous, but yet you can't seem to apply it to your own beliefs. And I don't blame them. It's not I'm trying
they're choosing to, but again, you know, it's not that you, like you said, it's not that you blame them. One of my biggest arguments with them is that own it.
Yeah, own it.
That this is not some objective information that you own it, that you are choosing to believe this. Because once you do that, the next time one of people that have the similar operating system that you have gets into politics, tries to legislate off of it.
There you go.
Hold up.
There you go.
You know what? We're not doing that because we're only doing objective things here, things that
we've already agreed.
Right.
We've already agreed this shit don't make sense, right? So
so I'm fine with you accepting that. If that's what makes you happy, whatever. But as long as you own the fact that there is no real reason.
Man, me and you, we think exactly alike, man. I'm so glad we had this conversation. Like you think exactly like I do, because a lot of atheists, like you said, are not skeptical.
They're not true skeptics,
and they don't really accept what you just said. And I know that because I've said the same thing you've just said. And when they're like saying, no, you have to make them not believe. Like you have to be more. Like no. You're missing the whole point. That's the whole point. You don't want to do that.
I'm not trying to be a thought cop, right?
Right.
If you want to believe that, fine. But what you think and what you believe is fine up here until it gets to the point where it's abusing other people and their right to exist, their right to live the way they choose to live. That's where that line is for me. You can have that. I'm not mad at you. And one of the other ways to cut really a long waste of your time is to ask them, is there any way you can be convinced that maybe some of the things you think are true are not? If they tell you no, don't waste your time. Because one thing I've learned, you have a finite amount of time here. You have a finite amount of energy to expend. It is far better for you to find more efficient ways. Like, for instance, with me, I chose music. I chose to put those messages in my music. Why? Because I had the better chance for a wider amount of people to hear these things. And then if it sparks something in them, and over the years, I've gotten messages from people that are now college age. That's, I was listening to your music when I was such, and it made me want to do it. Fine. I can use that energy there. In a conversation, there's no way you're going to reach the billions of people out there. And you don't have the time. And to be quite honest with you, I'm also very cognizant of my expertise, my particular expertise. I don't pretend to be something I am not. Right? I don't pretend to be that. You know, like if someone sees me wearing a doctor's outfit, chances are it's Halloween. I'm not a doctor, right? I'm not going to pretend to be that. I'm not going to pretend to be a physicist. I'm a fan, but I'm not going to pretend to be that, right? And I can
so true, man. You know, I cannot stand, like, you know, when I talk to certain believers of anything, right? They become these. They want to question you on these deep philosophical. You know, like, you know, they'll talk about, but you know, you're not you're not listening to the deep, rich philosophical
what
tradition
about the
of
writings
Thomism.
of
And
Pliny the Elder? I don't
it's
give
like,
a
yeah, who gives a shit? Like, let's just keep it real. Like
Yeah.
let's just keep it in the pocket, man. Like where
Just
we
keep it in the
can
pocket.
agree, because right now what you're talking about is some real esoteric information that I don't really care about and don't know about. And I'm just a very simple person, a very common sense kind of person. And I just feel like, well, for example, if a tire has 10 spokes on it and each spoke is not reliable, then to me it just seems like your tire's in danger of falling apart, because it's like, that's all I really need to know. That's as
let's
far
stay
as I want to
grounded.
talk about it.
Let's stay grounded. Like, because my wife said years ago, she said to me, a conversation is like a contract. In order for y'all to have this, y'all have to agree on the terms. So if you're using all of this stuff that you and I do not either agree on the definition of these terms, or both of us don't have a proper understanding of what these terms mean, this conversation is meaningless, and all you're doing is mentally masturbating because you're making yourself feel good. I am so enlightened. The other thing that bothers me about the whole enlightened thing is that a lot of people want to be thought of as that, but they don't want to put the work in and ask the real questions. My brother passed away last year. My brother, a lot of my friends I grew up with, when we got to a certain age, we were really asking these questions. All of us were involved with the Islamic religion. And during that time, we were really asking these questions, and I found the same issues with the Christian clerics, with the Islamic clerics, when it comes to asking specific questions. And what it wound up doing is, I remember taking my ass to the main branch Enoch Pratt Library in Baltimore, downtown Baltimore, on the 3rd floor in the Department of Humanities. And I remember pulling out books on some ancient Sumerian writings that predate all of that stuff, and reading, seeing that the Enuma Elish and all of this stuff, and seeing where the connections are. Okay, Abraham, if he existed, according to you guys, lived in this area. In this area, these stories were prevalent. They were prevalent. So in their pantheon, they had a god named El. Got you. Okay. Oh, so Utnapishtim is Noah. Got it. Then you start to see these questions that they don't want you to. And the sad part about it is, a lot of those clerks know about these things. I had a conversation with my imam because I found that there's a statue in the Louvre of Allah. They got that statue from the Kaaba, from the pagan Arabs. It was from that era. The pagan Arabs worshiped like 300 gods. Allah was one of the gods. He had a wife named Alat, and he had daughters. And on that statue was carved the crescent moon, because Allah was the moon god. And I went, ooh, so is this why most of the Islamic faith denominations represent their stuff using the crescent moon? Okay. So now I asked him about, so what? Imam, what about that statue over there? He knew that statue existed. If you were operating in good faith, you would have been the one to inform me about that. And you would have had an argument, some sort of thing. Apologetics for it. But the fact that you didn't even, I would go to newcomers class every Sunday, go to El Juma on Friday, newcomers class every Sunday, and that was never brought up. Why?
Right. Because they know it's gonna. It would just, even if they could have an apologetic for it, it's still gonna raise a question.
Yes.
It's still gonna have. There's some uncertainty there about a lot of that.
It is, because especially after you told me, and you were telling all of us that Allah is the same deity in the Old Testament. That's the same thing. Apparently, it's not, because the pagan Arabs of that era, it was just one of the many gods that they worshipped. And it appears to me, Prophet Muhammad picked one to make the monotheist. Here, Allah, this is who you focus on right here. And he used a lot of course, the Old Testament stuff because his father-in-law, one of his father-in-laws, was a priest. So now I'm starting to see all these connections that you did not tell me, and that's a problem to me. That's you not divulging this information. My father was a pastor.
Okay.
So I didn't have much experience with him because he was also a bastard. So, but from what they tell me, because I've only been around him in my memory, like when I was younger, of course, like a child, but in my memory, maybe 3 times I was around him. And I love every other time he was talking on the phone or whatever. From what they tell me, he was very well schooled. He went to seminar. He was very well schooled in that stuff. So for a lot of years, he did not participate. And then at the end, right around the end of his life, he pulled that card, became a pastor, or whatever. And it makes me wonder, man, like, what did you learn in there that kept you from participating all them other years? And towards the last parts of your life, you wonder what happened that made you not want to do that. Did you learn some stuff? Because
he did.
You know, my sister, she graduated from Villa Julie College, right? And she took certain classes in that stuff. And some of the same things that me and my brother Lance was learning once we were coming up out of that, she was learning in there. And it just led me to have the question, what did my father learn when he was in seminary that kept him from participating in that? What are they teaching them? What are they teaching these priests and these people that come up out of there become priests? What are they teaching them? Is there some information that they know would kind of sway people away from it? Like, okay, so these are, but they give them the apologetics to answer it. Apologetics don't always do it.
No, those are arguments. It's like, I wonder how many scholars, like professional scholars, started out neutral, went into scholarship, learned about the New Testament, you know, studied, and then became a Christian. Like, I know about all the scholars that were already Christian and got into scholarship, and then they just write books and, you know, but how many start off neutral and then become a Christian? I haven't read of any. And I think I saw an atheist show where I think Habermas, some apologist scholar, he asked them the same thing as, do you know of any scholars that started off neutral and went into that? He asked that question, and he was like, he kind of danced around it and said, well, there's a lot of scholars that are Christian. He goes, yeah, but did they start off Christian? He goes, that's a good question. I don't know. I'll link you. I'll go find some and I'll give you a link. And he never sent the link. And the guy talks about all these. I'm still waiting for the answer, because I would love to have those people on my show to talk to them. But I haven't received anything yet. Like, it's been like 3 weeks now, and the guy hasn't sent me anything. So I'm just assuming the answer to that question is no. And that's telling. That's very telling. And like you were mentioning, like some of these pagan backgrounds for Islam. I was a few years ago, I think there was some pottery found in ancient Canaan of Ashtoreth, like the wife of Yahweh, you know. And they have this pottery, and then they kind of link it to the Bible, where Ashtoreth is mentioned by name. I think in Kings, 2 Kings, or something like that. And then I think one of the priests that came about, not Melchizedek, some other priest, he was like the political person that really changed, you know, I think northern Jerusalem, where the temple was at, and he really changed it by removing all these poles and trees out of the temple. And then it became illegal to worship trees and objects and things like that. But before, and remember, this is according to the story. If we're following the story, you've got Moses, and then you've got Joshua, who, and then this whole thing. So this was after all that, when supposedly that stuff was already against the law, right? The law of Moses. So a lot of scholars say, well, the story of Moses was something that the priest invented during the Second Temple.
I've read that. Yep.
So this would explain why there were trees in the temple to begin with, that they decided to get rid of it, and then once they got rid of it, they decided to write this whole Moses story to kind of like tell people why we're not doing this, you know. And it was very interesting, but it raises doubt. And I think people, like you said, when they go to seminary and they have to learn these prerequisites about religious history, they probably get privy to that information. And they don't mention that stuff in Sunday.
They don't mention that in the sermon. And when they do their sermons, they don't mention that. And this again, it's one of the things where people have to learn to be okay with new data. And I know it's a very human thing, especially if you have an emotional attachment to this idea. That's very human, and I get that, and I allow for that. But when you start getting data that directly smashes that, and in on any other topic, data like that would have swayed you. You have to ask yourself, why won't it sway you here? Then you start to realize it's because you have an emotional attachment to that idea. It's what you want to be true. And I typically err on the side of, if I want it to be true, I question it harder.
Man, I had a debate with a Christian a few months ago, and we were debating about slavery in the Bible and stuff. And you know, and he was telling me that the mistake that I was making in my argument is I was appealing to emotion. Like he was saying, you're saying slavery's wrong because you feel like it's wrong, but you haven't really established whether God was wrong to allow for slavery, have you?
It's funny.
You've only told me you kind of assume that I'm going to agree with you. Like you think that we're all supposed to just assume that this was wrong and we go from there. Like, no, man. Scott,
people reveal themselves a lot.
Yeah, like I'm like, but and you know, my whole strategy at that point was like, yeah, and I guess we're all kind of appealing to emotion, and I am appealing to emotion because you know what? I do feel like slavery is wrong. I do feel like that, and I feel like it's against my moral virtues. And I feel like morality is kind of subjective in that way. And so you're kind of making my point that, yeah. And so my question now is, why don't you feel that way?
Yeah.
And I turned it around on him and he's like, well, because, you know, I may feel a certain way, but remember, I'm an imperfect human. God is the one who knows best and blah, blah, blah.
And therein lies the problem. You want something else to think for you. That's what it is. Some of the apologetics I've seen for that they're really interesting. Like, first I've heard, well, the type of slavery that they were engaged in was not like the chattel slavery engaged in the transatlantic slave trade. And I always say to them, would you be a slave? Because when you personalize it, and they start to realize you're talking about literally taking someone else's life from them while they're still breathing. You're taking their life from them while they're still breathing. Basically, they don't have control over what they do with themselves. And this is, they got one life to live, and you're stealing that from them because they don't have autonomy, because you make them do anything you need them to do, and it's not about their own volition of what they do. You're taking away basically their free will.
They don't care. You know, it's like the guy when I was debating him, he was kind of like, he went ahead and just granted, it was chattel slavery. Okay, I'll just grant you that because he knew enough about the Bible to know he wasn't going to waste a lot of time with me.
Right.
He already knew. I knew.
Right. He knew what you was going.
I have a strong religious background, so he already knew. So he's like, you know, let's just go ahead and grant it because you're right. They did. It says you buy the slaves from the nations around you and you can will them down to your children because I know you're going to bring all that up. I already predict you're going to talk about it. So let's just go ahead and accept it. Let's just not waste time. Now, he goes, but the thing is, he goes, slavery is bad because God, with the Exodus, you know, He said, you guys used to be slaves in Egypt. So apparently this was bad. He
Because
says, so God says it was bad. He goes,
great.
but the difference is these are God's children, Israel, the nation of Israel. They wrestle with God. And their wrestling with God was to understand his thinking. And his thinking was, it was bad for you to be a slave, but it's not bad for the heathens around you to be a slave. And he goes, and so where he goes, and Scott, that's where you're getting it mixed up. You're appealing to your emotion, because we all know slavery's bad, and you're right, you feel that way. But what you're doing is you're feeling sorry for the heathens. And I'm like, but that's so subjective. And like, think about it. Do you think
really
the African slave trade would have even been possible if people hadn't a thought like you? Like, if people think it's that kind of thinking, because think about it. The Africans were from the nation. They were heathens too. Yeah. According to you, because they weren't Christians.
They were pagans. According to the Christian ideology and their positioning, anyone that's not that is a pagan, is a heathen, is whatever.
Right. By definition.
By definition. You know, so it's just really interesting how they can't see how toxic that is.
They really can't.
And it's also interesting to me is like when I've talked to Black people about that very same thing.
That's sad.
I have friends that are Catholics. There's one dear friend of mine for probably 30 years. She's a Catholic. We had that conversation one time. And I said to her, I said, the Catholic Church is a criminal organization. Well, how could you say that? I said, well, I could go back centuries with the crimes that organization has committed, but we'll talk about modern times, something that you can really get your grasp now. The things that was happening with the children, it's one thing if it was individual priests doing this on their own, and when the head of the church found out this was happening, they put a stop to it. They called the police. They locked these people up. No, they was moving these people from one parish. They get an accusation here. They move from this parish to that parish. So they're still putting kids in the line of fire of these pedophile priests. This is a decision being made by the organization, the institution, not just these. Because listen, in every field, be it medicine, politics, whatever, you're going to have those debauched people in those fields. That does not mean that those fields are bad. It means that people are people, and they come from all stripes, and they sometimes filter their way in all these different occupations. It's a difference when the institution is allowing it and covering up. And no, that's a criminal organization.
Criminal by definition. Again, that's what it is. That's what it is. And you know, it really strikes me when I hear Black people, especially around here, I've talked to, they're like, well, you know, we're cursed people. You know, we come from horrible. Ham and all that's of this. It's like they're like, you know, we're cursed people. This explains. It's like, dude, come on now. Like, you really think in that way? And this is what perpetuates a lot of ignorance and stupidity that goes on around here. It's because it's like they don't have no expectation for themselves or their culture.
That's it.
You know,
that's it. And this is to me, one of the biggest crimes against humanity that took place. It's not just the enslavement of a people. It's not just that, because that's been happening in human history for the longest time. It's not just that. It's when you supplant someone else's ideals into a people that benefits the person that's supplanting it and not the people. You've literally put these ideas in their head to benefit you because this makes them docile. And also because, like you said, if you believe that, you have no reasonable expectation that you're supposed to have a better life than that. Because we're cursed.
Cursed people, yeah. Well, you know, you mentioned earlier about KRS-One, and one of the records that, or a lot of his philosophy and his music
Mhm.
was to try to bring Black pride into it. And he
Mhm.
would always say like Jesus was Black. I think he had a
Mhm.
record that was to that. I
Yep.
can't
remember the name of it. I know the song "You Must Learn."
You must learn.
He had a video, and it had a depiction of Moses as a black
Black.
man, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's put that in there several times. I have a lot of. So this is my take on a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's nuanced because there's very few black and white things like in our existence. They're shades of gray. So I get why you want to do that. If you had centuries of people telling you black is bad, and then labeling you black, you're black and black is bad, black is bad, black is bad. The psychological damage I witnessed personally in my life, I've witnessed the psychological damage of that, of little black kids not wanting to have little black doll babies. I've witnessed that, right? So I certainly get the desire to attempt to repair that. My issue comes with how it's done, because I don't think we need to be leaning into these religious things. The reason that they choose to talk about Jesus not being European, of course, the reason they choose to lean into that is so that it still makes it okay for black people to be involved with Christianity.
Church. Yeah, right.
It still keeps you in the church. It still keeps you right there, right? And this is my issue with that, is that it's out of the frying pan, still in the fire, right? Like, and so if you accept that, and in the way that we know people accept religious dogma, it's emotional, it's not necessarily based and rooted in facts. If you accept that, it still keeps you there. So my thing is, instead of doing that, let's just explain how these perceptions about what being black is were created. Let's talk. Let's have a serious conversation, and let's take the myths and throw them over here in the corner, and let's have a serious conversation about how you psychologically damage a people. And by the way, this can happen to any group. If you took you take any group and you malign them, and more importantly, you disconnect them from the original culture that they was from. So that first generation, they're still going to remember that stuff. And they're going to remember their self-worth. And they know that things are being done to them, not because they deserve it. No, things are being done to them. But as those generations continue, that first generation dies off. And they don't pass those things. There's a reason why they penalized slaves for trying to speak any of the languages they came from, or worship any of the religious things that they can't. It's a reason for that. So when generations go by, no one's teaching any of that self-worth stuff, any of that value. We came from this, we did this. No one's teaching that. So what are these new generations learning? They're learning with the people that are oppressing them, what they want them to know. And that's psychological damage that doesn't just go away overnight or with the passing of a law. Right. That's something that's going to come from serious conversations being had, research, all of that from people far smarter than me, right? To be able to deal with this sort of psychological damage. I don't know that painting Jesus up and making him black or making Moses black, I don't know that gets us out of the pain. It doesn't.
It's so weird. Like, I married into an African family too, right? And the thing about that one is, in Kenya, like my ex-wife, she's from Kenya, right? And her family there were Catholics and Protestants. Like there's some of that. But there's also a tradition of spiritism, like ancestor worship, things like that.
My mother-in-law.
And a lot of her family anyways kind of rejected all that because of the brainwashing that it got colonized.
That's the other dirty little story that's not really told, is that the things that were happening to the Africans that were brought here in the United States eventually
but
happened
not
on the continent too. It happened
right.
on the continent too.
But there's a dynamic there that's missing. There's something a little more sadistic here in
Mhm.
America than
Mhm.
over there.
Yeah.
And this is the conversation I have even till today with a lot of my ex-wife's cousins, because we're all close and
Right.
we talk about these things. And what happens is over there, well, for one thing, all you see is black people.
Yes.
You get off the airplane over
Right.
there, you just see a
A
sea
sea
of
of black
black
faces.
people.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all you see is
Yeah.
black, 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 black.
Right.
TV commercials, black people, entertainment, everything is black people. That's all you see.
Right.
And so for them, when they go to church, though, they worship the white Jesus,
Mhm.
but it's
Mhm.
not even consciously registered. It's
Right.
almost like they don't think about it. Like
Mhm.
it's almost like there's not really a white person there telling them to do this.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like
Right.
over here, that's how
Right.
it is. You know what I mean? And it's
Right.
like, so for them, they don't have this sort of resentment or
Mm-mm.
anger that exists. And so, like their family, when they come here and we have these conversations, and um, it's I hate saying this. It sounds really bad, and I'm not really putting African people in any kind of light
No,
or
no, no. I understand.
anyone, but like when I went to a family reunion a couple years ago, I went to his name is Uncle Mwangi. So
Mhm.
I went to his house, and he's a very educated guy and very owns businesses in
Right.
Kenya, and he lives
Right.
here and owns businesses. So he's well to do, well educated,
Right.
whole family that way. And he invited me upstairs to smoke cigars with him, because he had just met me. He was
Right.
like, Scott, come up here, let's smoke cigars and have a conversation. So we went
Right.
up, we had wine and cigars, and went right to it, man. He went right into it,
Wow.
because he was like, so let me ask you, as a white man here in America, do you have friends with African American people? And I was like, sure, because I was thinking maybe he was going to judge me if I didn't.
Mhm.
So I was like, and I have family, and I was
Right.
telling the whole story, and he was like,
Right.
well, he just kind of sat there and thought about it, and looked at me and says, just don't bring those people around me.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was like,
That's
what? Whoa, what do you mean? And he was like, we don't have anything to do with those people.
that
And I was
exists.
like, yeah. And I was
That
like,
exists.
really. And so we got into talking, because he is very political, and he
Mhm.
likes to talk about current events, and I was trying to explain, the history. And he goes, "Oh, I know the history, man.
Mhm. Mhm.
I understand Black history, the American history. I could probably tell you more about American history than you know, young man.
Mhm.
I know more about this country than you do."
Right.
And he goes, "And I'll tell you, the problem with the Black culture in America is this, this, this." And he went on, and
Mhm. Mhm.
all this terrible stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but what you're missing, it's kind of like, it almost kind of comes across like there's no emotional connection. Like,
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
think you understand what it feels like, though,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
an
Like
African.
you can read all the stuff you want, but until you have that experience, I'm glad you brought that up, because these conversations that I have a bunch of African friends,
Mm,
and what that's taught me over the years is that there's definitely a segment of people that were born on the continent, Africans that were born on the continent of Africa, that have certain perceptions about African Americans. But what it's
mm,
also taught me is that there's many of them that don't. And I'm gonna
mhm,
give you an example of the things I saw personally, which a lot of that, the way they think, some of those people over there think about the African Americans over here, African Americans over here think about them.
mm,
I worked at the State Highway Administration years ago,
mm,
and there was a Nigerian that worked there with me named Israel. So some of the ways I would hear some of the other Black people that were born here in the United States talk about him was disgusting.
mhm,
And I would always push back on it. And me and him became really cool. And we would have these conversations. And I was like, he did not have those same type of feelings towards them. But I could
mhm,
certainly see, just knowing myself, how being constantly exposed to that sort of treatment can make people feel a certain type of way.
mhm,
I think one of the things that took place, here in this country, and this is a hard conversation that a lot of people don't want to have. So right here in the United States, Black African Americans were taught that basically the people that had to experience slavery was those people back then, because they don't want modern African Americans to feel a connection to those people back then. But they also don't want modern African Americans to feel a connection to Africa either. So basically, all we're told that we have is what's right here in that space of time, 400-year time period. That's it. That's it for you. We have to reject that, because there's nothing wrong with you learning about your cultural heritage, what happened, how many years ago. There's nothing wrong with learning that. Not a damn thing. When they take that away from you and then supplant these ideas about what the Africans that were born on the continent are, and then put in their head, because you gotta remember, America exports more than just goods out of this country. They export ideas,
culture,
right?
yeah,
culture, all of that stuff. That's why you could go right now to Korea, and some of the same stereotypes about Black people that exist in the United States exist over there, and some of them haven't even met a Black person, right? So, they export ideas as well. These things, I've always, well, I would say in the last 20 years or so, I've seen myself as somebody that wanted more of a connection with the diaspora, because I've been, for the most of my life, pretty much in a bubble with African Americans, people just born over here, right? So I made the effort to go and make friends, and with Africans, with Jamaicans, with people that was part of the African diaspora globally. I have friends that I can sit down and have these conversations with and get some sort of understanding, because it begins with having a conversation, have an understanding of why they feel a certain type of way. Because I can tell you why a lot of African Americans feel that way. Some of it's ingrained. Like, basically, I've heard this: you left us, like you let them take us and abuse us, and then you didn't do anything to try to get us back, right? Now, regardless of whether or not the logistics of that makes sense, that's the feeling of abandonment.
That's the feeling, yeah.
That's the feeling of abandonment, right? So some of these attitudes over here stem from those things, and then they tend to stack, because when you have these personal experiences where you get in the cab with an African cab driver, and you have a very unproductive conversation with them.
Oh man,
these
big
things
time.
stack. These things
Big
stack.
time.
And what I try to do is, because I recognize that it doesn't benefit me to carry on attitudes that other people had before I was born. And I need to see if this is a thing. Do I really feel this way, or was I taught to feel this way? You know what I mean? So it's always been important for me to kind of
separate that out,
and really get to talk to people. And I've met some of my best friends are people that weren't born here, and they call, check up on me. I check up on them when something's going on over there. I can talk to them and get the skinny on it, rather than circumvent the mainstream media thing about what's you from over there, or you got other, what's really happening over there that you saw, right? Those things are all useful for me, so I don't carry some of the negative perceptions about Africans that were born on the continent as some other people do. And a lot of my African friends, they don't either, but they tell me it's real. They tell me
it is,
it's real.
And sometimes I just don't understand the disconnect. Like, I'll tell you another little story. Years ago, before I moved to California, I was living here in Florida, and I had an apartment, and my roommate, I was a friend. He was Jamaican. He was born in Jamaica. He was recent to America at that point in time. It was about 10, 12 years ago or something.
Right.
And we were trying to run business together. Like, we got along really well, talked really well, and and we started running business, and then we got shut down. The state came on us and shut us
wow.
down.
Wow.
And it was hard for me to find a job. It was really hard for him because he had such a thick accent, and he didn't really have his papers together or something. Like he had to marry some American girl to get in the country or whatever.
Wow.
And just for that purpose, like he didn't even live with her, know her that good.
Wow.
Like he just paid her money, and
Right.
he was living with me. And so we decided to get into the street pharmaceutical business, right?
Right.
And we were doing that for a couple of years, you know, and we
Right.
did that, and we were kind of, and everyone that were working with us, you know, people that were kind of doing, you know, delivering and stuff like that were African American people, right?
Right.
And a lot of them got jumped and in trouble, and they all kind of knew, and then we started to be known as, yeah, you know, Kevin, he's the Jamaican dude, but
Right.
he's partnered with this white dude, this white guy named Scott,
Right.
man. They live over here. So it became kind of like crazy, you know.
Right. I bet.
Yeah, and then people came and they took our vehicles and stuff to get money back because our people got, you know, kidnapped, man. And it sounds crazy, but they took our cars and stuff.
Listen,
and yeah,
it's sad to say.
Yeah,
all that stuff sounds very normalized.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've had friends that were kidnapped over that stuff and hid in squirreled away in trucks until the people paid the money to. Yeah,
just it's stupid. And it isn't anything I'm proud of. And it was something that we weren't really trying to take it that far or whatever. But you know how it goes. Like you get into the game like that, it escalates really quick. Once you're in, and you can't like back out with people when you owe them money or whatever.
No.
You know, it ain't that easy, you know. So it took a while to get out of that situation. But anyways, through the whole situation though, you know, like I said, there's African Americans that are working with us and stuff. But his whole attitude, and we used to have this conversation all the time, and he'd be like, yeah, you know, I don't understand African American people myself, you know. And like the funny thing was, like, he loved hip hop music, like he loved the clothing, like he dressed sharp, man. He used to we used to go out to the club, man. He'd wear like really nice. And he got me turned on. Like we'd turn up at the club wearing nice clothes. We were into music and in the hip hop. We were trying to start a studio and have people come in. We were doing it, man, like really living this. And it kind of turned into this like street kind of life, you know. And it was like, but he was not really feeling it, like as far as that cultural divide. Again, he was like, you know, in Jamaica, you know, we don't have this problem with, you know, this anger about white people and the slavery and the blah, 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 blah. And he goes, I just, you know, we'd have this conversation with some of the guys, you know, come over and always be an argument about the shit, you know, like, you know, and but it was so weird. What I couldn't understand was it's like, but you understand, Kevin, because you even told me being your friend in this whole situation, this whole business we're doing right now is a benefit for all of us because of what?
Right.
You get it. Like nobody's telling you nothing that you're not even already buying into yourself. So I don't understand how you don't understand, you know.
You know what? I think too, it's also about like history bears on people a little differently, depending on where they are on that rung on that ladder, right? So here in the United States, there was never a time where Black people could be in a complete vacuum. They always had to deal with the dominant demographic, the rules that they basically made, the systems they put in place. Even though the people from Jamaica and the West Indies and all of that, even though, yes, they were brought over here as slaves, at a certain point in time, they had some autonomy. You go to Jamaica, they run their own stuff. So it's not like they still have overseers, even the perception of overseers over top of them. So when you've had that for the better part of a century, or 2 centuries, whatever like that,
different.
You don't think about it. It's not always in your face. It's not always.
You see nothing but Black people every day.
Yeah,
like that's all you see.
So I can certainly understand them healing from a lot of that, because they are pretty much, for the most part, charting their own destiny. They're moving, you know, they're doing so. At this point, yes, You can look at trade policies and all those other things too, because they have an effect on the nation's growth and all that stuff too. But at a certain point, you're charting your own destiny. It's on you. So the decisions y'all make, how y'all choose to negotiate with other nations, and all of these things, it's all on you. Here, it's a bit more. This is not really a melting pot. It's more like a gumbo pot, right? There are all different nationalities here, ethnicities, you name it, are right here. They're competing for resources. There's a competing narrative of history that's here because at one point there was the dominant demographic. Their story was the story. That was the story. And then as time went on, other demographics got the ability to speak up for themselves, to have their own perceptions of what took place and what didn't take place. And they got to speak on it now. So now they're competing narratives. There's a lot going on here that's not going on over there in Jamaica. It's not. Yeah. They all have an understanding of who they are.
It is deep here. Like, it's so, like you said, that melting pot situation. You know what's really funny? And I find this kind of comical myself, but a lot of people, like whether they're family or friends, like I consider myself a white guy. Like when I go anywhere, I'm a white guy. Like people see me as white. I'm biologically white.
That's how you identify. Yeah.
That's how I identify because, you know, not that I'm into colorism or racism or anything, but because that's just how I'm viewed by society. So I just go along with it, right?
You really shouldn't feel any kind of way about that.
Any kind of way about it. But the thing about it, man,
like that's what it is. Like
there are some family members and even friends who don't understand why I identify as white. And I'm like, why do you say that? They're like, you should identify as black because your family is black and you know, and it's like I don't think you understand.
You can still be white and have black family.
Yeah, like
do you know that I'm part Irish?
Really?
When they did the
I can tell with your freckles. No, I'm just kidding.
right. Look, when they did this little cheek swab thing and I did the heritage thing like that, there is a smidgen of Irish in me. So, but look at me. When I walk down the street, there's no police officer go, hey, go grab that Mick over there. Nobody's gonna do that. Nobody's gonna do that.
And it would be silly for you. You know, it would just be silly for me. Like it would be almost disrespectful in a way. It would be like, you know, I don't know. It's really weird. It's like, it's kind of like that. It just for some reason reminds me of that saying, he's openly gay or openly this or that. And it's like, well, you can't be openly black or openly white. Like, unless you say James Brown was openly black.
right. That's a little difficult to pull off, right? Like,
yeah, like that's funny.
You know,
that's funny. It's funny. Like it doesn't make sense. Like, you know, it's
I think one of the things this also segues into one of the things that I've had conversations with people too about labels. Now, often I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't like labels. They say, like, I don't want to be a white American or black American, this and another. I just want to be American. I said, okay, so you do realize that's still a label. Like, if you really want to break it down to the smallest atoms of this, you are a carbon-based primate. You know what I'm saying? So like, we can get really ridiculous and technical, but it loses utility. Like there's no problem. I don't have a problem with that stuff. Like that's
I did that when I got my job here in Florida. I did it just for fun. Just for fun. Right. On the application, race, I said black. And then when I got to the interview, wait, you're not black. I'm like, well, well, you're being arbitrary, sir. At what point are we talking about? Yeah. Are we talking about current? Or are we talking about a million years ago?
300,000 to a million years ago.
200,000 years ago, my
migration. Right. Like, what are we talking about here?
It's just funny. Ridiculous. Yeah.
That reminds me of a conversation. I forget what the entire gist of the conversation I was having with Great Square. And he said something about humans. That's okay. So first, when are we defining this as human? And he went, I hadn't thought about it like that. Yeah. Because at a certain point, we referred to them in as in anthropology as something else. Like this is something else. This is not. It's related, but it's not that. So
that's right.
What point is that? So it to the point it gets ridiculous when they start trying to break it. And that's why I say, yo, is it? Just let me know how you identify, how you want me to identify you, because it's personal in a lot of ways. It's personal, and I will do that. I'm not going to get into a pissing contest with you about whether or not you're this or you're that. If you say this is what you're, okay.
I'd like to hear a song. I'd like to hear a rap song about that. That'd be funny. Like that would be
I'm sure there's Jonah Lucas. A lot of his songs, not a lot of them, but he has a fair share of songs because he is mixed. That kind of discusses that that very thing to the point. Some of them are a little annoying, but he's a really good artist, MC.
Right.
I can always make the disconnect if something's not my cup of tea, but the guy's still skilled. I can identify the skill. He's very skilled. He's just not my cup of tea.
Right.
With most of his discography, but he has songs where he kind of discusses that dynamic. See, with me, that's not the dynamic experience I had. And I noticed that artists, they're going to talk about typically their experience. And that's what makes them to me, that's what makes it interesting. The thing that makes artists not interesting to me is when they have this homogenized sound where they're just basically attempting to do, oh, this is what's hot, well, I'm gonna do this now. And it's like no character in it. It's
been like that for in the hip hop game or rap game. I don't even want to call it hip hop after a while. It's like it becomes just the entertainment business after a while. That's like
all it is. It's pop. It's pop.
Like everybody wants to front like they're a thug or they're a street guy or something like that. And so they're just talking about the same thing, using the same slang of the day. No, and like I said, that's why I love the music that I came up with, and I know it's subjective, and a lot of people. It's why I do the channel I do.
Right.
When I grew up, you know, I first heard, you know, the Sugar Hill Gang. You know, that was cool, but then when they came with Planet Rock, it changed everything for me. It became a phenomenon, and then the rap music changed, and then no one was biting. Like that was a huge thing. You couldn't be biting nobody's style.
Right.
You know, that was like
that's heresy.
Heresy,
like,
right?
I've seen people beat up for that, like in
of course.
I've seen that's my and not even just in the rap, in breakdancing.
Yeah,
you take a certain move sequence. Yeah, that's not. And they know you saw them do that, and it could get dark for you out there.
Oh yeah, it got wild, man.
I've been there. I've seen it. You know?
you couldn't bite, you couldn't steal style, and so that just forced. Like if you notice, like during the golden era, you know, and you know, you start off like kind of like nursery rhymes and over a live band playing like the Sugar Hill Gang, to where now, you know, they went into like the drum machine, the electro rap style, and then a year or two years later it became like the golden era where it's like samples,
James Brown samples, and
and it just
funkadelic.
Then it went back to the drum machine era, and then it's like, man, it's like, wow, no one wanted to be comfortable doing the same thing. Everybody was always thinking like you could have a Public Enemy on one hand, and then you could have like a
De La Soul over here,
or De La Soul. You could have different styles and things like that. And the music though now homogenized. It's all the same. It's like a monolith. Everybody says the same language. I mean, I remember for the last few years they kind of stopped now. It's like skirt, saying all that stuff. It's like, how long you guys gonna be holding on and biting that style?
Well, I'm gonna tell you how long. So now that the art is kind of out of it, it's a numbers game. Right now, for the last few years, in fact, hip hop is the most streamed genre over everything else. As long as that remains that, these guys will game the algorithm by doing this exact same style. The drum patterns are very similar. The flow patterns are very similar. My daughter said to me a little while ago, she was listening to a song that I had, a recent song that I had done. And she said, Daddy, a lot of your style is very reminiscent of 90s, early 2000s. I said, yeah. She said, is there ever a time when you wanted to like try to do what they're doing now? I said, all of the things that they're doing now presents no challenge to me. A lot of the ways that they're rapping presents no challenge to me because I've gone through every stage of hip hop, and I literally have songs that I haven't released just to see if I could do it like that. And I don't like it. And I don't want to be defined by it. And I don't want it in my discography.
Right.
So I'm on my deathbed, and I have to float in my head that there was music I did just because they said that I don't want it. Now I have other projects that I absolutely am more comfortable with getting a wide acceptance, like the comic book company me and Graydon started. I want a wide acceptance, but my music is personal too. And I don't want that sullied by desires and motivations of, oh, this will make me $1 million. I don't want it.
When you look at artists, yeah, like if you look at artists, I respect like artists that always maintain a consistency and a trueness about themselves. I had 95 North. Now they're a house music production group, right? And I knew these guys when I lived in Richmond, Virginia, and one of the guys were from New Jersey, and the other guy, I think he was from DC, and they came and they lived in Richmond, or at least one, Doug did. Doug lived in Richmond. And anyways, they always, their whole thing about house music, and I was right there with them. I used to produce, and we used to all go to the same gigs and the same thing. And we always kept it like where it was always like soulful house music. Like they were into, you know, they were African-American dudes. So they were like into like either a real gospel sound, house music, or a very soulful, funky sound. And they had all these opportunities though to kind of do like more of that corny type of techno.
I knew you were gonna say that.
And it was like in the 90s. And so they were like, they always refused. And like some of my friends were like, man, they need to get that money though, man. They gotta hustle and get that money, man. And they were even thinking about changing the moniker up. Like they said, well, we could actually change our name just so we don't attach it. But at the end of the day, they're still going to find out, you know, in history, they're going to find out. And we just don't want to lose that kind of respect. And we just want to do what we do, man, and keep it. And we can be successful at just doing what we do, man, and keeping it real like that. And I respected that decision, man. And it took a lot to do that, because they had a lot of offers on the table, because they were already successful in what they were doing. But as you know, in the 90s, around the mid 90s, the stuff started changing. Like they got away from that classic house style, started going out.
That's a fact.
And they started bringing this techno stuff in, and they weren't with it, man.
In Baltimore, same with club music. There was a certain period in the 90s, it flipped, where there was no longer even really vocals on a lot of the stuff. As far as somebody actually in the studio recording, they were just interpolations of people saying stuff and looped and shit like that. There was the time in club music in Baltimore, people were singing on those. And I actually like that version of club music, because I'm one of the weirdos in Baltimore. I am not a fan of club music.
Okay.
And if you go to Baltimore, talk to anybody and tell them you're from there, born and raised there,
and you don't like it,
you don't like club music, they look at you odd, right?
Shout out to my nephew in Moultrie in Baltimore. He's a house music DJ. Just a big shout out to him, because I know he's gonna be watching this. And, he loves that stuff, man.
I do not like club. The only club music that I liked was the ones from the era where people were singing over the club tracks. And it wasn't so redundant. The same booms, 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 but it wasn't that same thing. But I respect listen, people got to do what they're comfortable with. If you're comfortable with chasing the winds of change all the time, to do that, do you? Because as all artists evolve. I am not the same type of artist that I was back when I was 13. That's a given. That's a given. But I still have certain core principles about how I see this music, how hip hop sounds to me.
It's a relationship with you.
It's a relationship with me. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're relating it to you because you know what you like and you know what your skill set is and what you're good at. And you're not trying to step out of your lane to go do some stuff to just to fit in when you don't fit in.
And look
trying
at
to get
me,
into
bro.
something, you know.
Look at me, bro. I've had this conversation with some of my artists that like I'm twice their age, right? Look at me, bro. You see these feathers?
Right.
I'm old enough to be a lot of these guys' father. What would I look like going out there doing drill music? Seriously.
Right. Exactly. It ain't realistic.
It's
not.
It
would just look weird, you know.
It looks weird. It looks weird. Yeah. And listen. One thing I take pride in is the fact that even now, to this day, 2022, I have a fervent cult following at my age now, and a lot of the artists that I've worked with that I'm twice their age don't. So don't tell me that I need to be trying to do with that. No, I'm gonna do what I like. Because
that's the beautiful thing. The beautiful thing though about the time we live in, and I know this because I I release a lot of dance music and a lot of I produce like a lot of hip hop artists as well. You know, I mean, we're putting stuff out and we're trying to get it on like these DJ portals like Beatport and Track Source and all these different things. And we sell stuff to record labels all the time. And it's like the one thing that you're gonna realize, or that I've realized, is that, man, there's a genre for everything. There's a niche for everything. Like even like all these old school beats I might be putting together. There's a whole category for that. And then these record labels will be like, dude, that's exactly what we need right now because we've got a whole big demand out here for classic hip hop sound, or we've got a whole thing for, deep house music sound. Like it's I think in the domain of the radio is where people kind of assume this is what's going on. Like this is what's happening.
That's what happened. That's exactly what happened. Because radio, there's a lot of politics to radio, and they push a certain sound, and all the background noise that happens in radio, people complain, and they'll say, well, they keep playing the same things, but you're still tuning in. We live in a different time now. I don't have to listen to the radio and wait for the song that I want to listen to, right?
I don't listen to the radio. I play Spotify.
Right.
I play all kinds of shit on Spotify. Yeah.
You put everything on my phone, and I can walk and listen to the music I want to listen to. And this experience, multiply this by billions of people who can now create their own playlist on Spotify or Tidal or wherever else they're on, and curate their own soundtrack of their life, right? So I don't need to wait for the radio to tell me when something is cool. Oh, this is a hit. No, I'll tell you what's a hit. I'll listen to that's a hit. That's a hit.
Same thing with TV. TV has a limited amount of content where you can go to YouTube now and you can see great production shows like the Electro Live.
Then I watch more YouTube. Shameless plug. I watch more YouTube than I do actual television, and to the point where I watch YouTube on my television. So
that's me 100%. I don't even buy cable no more. I don't need it. Like I don't have kids. Like my kids, they wanted cable. They wanted whatever.
Right.
Me, now that I'm on my own over here, I just turn on my YouTube, hook it up to my TV, and I'm good. Like
my wife just last night, when I was talking about because we do have the Infinity thing and all of that, and we was talking about last night. Why? We have Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus.
I got that too.
All that stuff.
That's all you need.
What do you need that other stuff for? Like, what do you need that? You don't really. And we are seriously considering saving $250 extra a month.
I like money. I like my money in my pocket. That's what I like in my bank account. Like,
I'd much rather save that money for us to be able to do some traveling, some more traveling.
Hell yeah. Last year, man, dude, ever since I stopped paying that high rent over in California and paying all the cable and all that, man, I I was all over. I was like a globetrotter last year, bro. I was in Mexico. I was in friggin' Miami, Tampa, Florida.
Wow.
Like I was all over the place, man. Vegas. Like I was really just traveling and spending the money the way I want. And
Where you
it
want
was
it.
even still cheaper
Yes,
because I was
still
saving
cheaper.
money. That was just extra money that I was
Exactly.
just blown. I couldn't even do that. Like when I was in California, you're talking about working 2 and sometimes 3 little hustles at the same
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
just to make
Just to make ends meet.
$3,500 a month
Mm-hmm.
rent for a little 2-bedroom.
Yeah, bro.
Dude,
That's
that's
crazy.
for the bird. That's
Whoa, whoa,
that's
whoa,
the
whoa,
for the
whoa.
birds, bro.
You said 3,500
Mm-hmm.
for a 2-bedroom, bro.
For a
We
2-bedroom, bro.
We have a 5-bedroom here for 25. That's
Yeah.
California is crazy.
It's crazy, dude. That's why I had to, that's why I was happy to leave, man, because
I don't blame you.
3,500 for a 2-bedroom little apartment, and there's no competition. Like there's no where you can in California, you're either living in the hood or you're living in a nice place like that. There's no in between.
There's no in
None.
between.
No in between, bro. And it's like, man, and then you got to think about, your car payment, your all of this other stuff. So it's like for me, man, I had to work 2 jobs, and I was running sound at this other thing at night. On the weekends, I was doing all kinds of work, and I'm like, I'm an old man, dude. I'm like in my 50s, bro.
Right.
I ain't got time to be working all those jobs. I'll be dead before Christmas, man.
It's a fact. It's a fact.
Like, man, I need to go somewhere and that's why people in California are leaving in droves. They're moving to cheaper places like Nevada, Texas, Florida. And like here, you can find like a 3-bedroom place like for just $1,500 a month.
Wow,
and
that's crazy.
Nothing. That's like half what I was paying.
We considered was that maybe around 2013. We considered the Florida move, but we didn't do it. This is one of the reasons why I'm moving out of the country, because I know places to go where the cost of living, your shit will stretch. Panama.
Oh yeah.
Belize. I went to Belize in 2019. Stayed down there for a week. My wife loved it, and the cost of living, the dollar is worth twice there. Like, places you can go with reasonably good infrastructures. People leave you the fuck alone.
They really will. They really will. Like last year, I went to Playa del Carmen, man. I went with a girlfriend, and we went there to Cancun, and then maybe an hour or so down the road was Playa del Carmen, and Playa del Carmen was like it had like a really ritzy area, like with the mansions and all of that kind of stuff. And then they had like the little barrios, and then they had this main street, which was just, man, dude, it was like the Vegas Strip on steroids. It's like all night long, Monday through Sunday, man. The people would walk up and down the street partying. Club music is banging all night long. And the funny thing was, I was tripping, man, because it'd be 3 o'clock in the morning. We'd be walking around, and you'd see like little 6-7-year-old kids out in the street by themselves, just dancing and getting down, And then we went to a club, and you see moms in there with her strollers and stuff. Like,
wow,
like they ain't letting them kids stop them from partying.
Wow, that's crazy.
They're trying to get their groove on, man.
Yeah,
Fuck that.
I'm gonna tell you, man. As soon as I saw, I do my research on everything. As soon as I saw that the standard of living in Panama was cheaper, and yet the infrastructure in Panama City is like Miami, I went, oh really? I looked at the surrounding counties, and I saw in Boquete, the average temperature all year long is 75 degrees. And I looked at the cost of living there, and I looked at the medical stuff, because we're getting up in age, and that's important. I saw all of these things, and I factored all that in, and I told my wife, I was like, that's one of the reasons to stretch our retirement and live close to the same type of lifestyle we used to here, an environment we used to here, but not spend as much money. And also, to be quite honest with you, I am tired of the conversation here. I just want to be. I'm tired of it. It's great for music. Don't get me wrong. It inspires a lot of the music that I do, but it also takes a toll on me because I'm one of those people. I'm going to care. As long as I'm here, I'm going to care. That's just the way I'm built. So this stuff wears on me, and stress. Music. That's the other thing about music. They say that music is like therapy. I'm here to tell you it's not. At least in my experience, at the least, what it is a nice release. That dopamine, that nice release. But after that's over. Whatever issues that were there are still
there.
There.
That's the thing about meditation and like I produce music, and so I see it as a form of meditation where at least for however long I'm busy creating, time seems to go away. My thoughts and worries and overthinking and chatter in my brain is at least relieved for that time. And then when I'm done, I feel and I can relax. But the problems still come back. They're still there, and you still got these damn bills, and you still got these damn people at work that act crazy, and you got all this stuff.
It's still there. It's still there. It's still there.
You need to go somewhere you can get away from all that bullshit, you know.
And the one thing that 5 days when I was in Belize, the one thing that stuck out to me was all of the conversations that we feel are so important over here. Some people not worried about that shit over there. They're not worried about all the stuff that is the hot topic that's all on social media and that's all people talking about. They wasn't worried about that. It was just me. It was me and my wife in a golf cart on the road to San Pedro.
There you go.
That bumpy road to San Pedro. Me and my wife going to the secret beach. Me and my wife. That's what it was. And
that's what's important, man. That's the important thing in life. You get to, hold hands with your wife on the beach and just enjoy the moment. Instead of worrying about all this drama over here and all this chatter that goes on, because it's like all you hear about at work is always it's going to be Trump this or Trump that, or Biden this or Biden that. Or, all these little things that people imagine are supposed to be so important.
The things they tell you you're supposed to care about. And I'm telling you, it's killing us.
It is.
It's killing us. And I don't want that. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being part of that story. Like I'm tired of being actively a NPC in that video game. I'm tired of it. I don't want it. Now, of course, I got prerequisites. The place has to have great internet because I do still like to stay informed, but I also like to produce music. Like I said, we have the comic book thing. I need to be able to contact my other company members, people, other owners, and I'll come back and forth to go to comic book conventions and things like that. But I want my peace of mind to be where I lay my head.
Quality of life and getting rid of these expectations. Like I used to live in Europe, a number of years ago, and when I lived in Europe, it was a different atmosphere coming from the States, where it's all about all these bills and all these traumas and problems with people and that life, and then coming to Europe, it was almost like a vacation every day because, work, our lunch periods were like 3 hours long. And
I've seen the documentaries about Italy.
Yeah.
And I've seen it.
It was so nice, man. And then everybody's outside. Everybody, like when you get off work, everybody's supposed to meet out at the pub and sit down in front of the thing outside and drink your beers. And life is cheap. My electric bill every month was $30. The flat was really nice and a really beautiful section of Stuttgart, Germany. Rent was only $400 a month, and I was working for Americans, so I was getting paid American wages.
My wages over there. Oh my!
It was like, bro, dude,
that's crazy,
and that's where I met my African wife, because she was running her own business. She had all kinds of she was selling car parts in Japan, and then she had a boutique in Germany and a boutique in Italy, and so she was like a traveling girl.
Yeah, she's doing
and
her thing.
her dad was like a diplomat, you know, for a Belgian diplomat. So I was working for NATO, so that's where I met a lot of people. And
Right.
yeah, it was just a fun life. It was like you never know how good things are till you leave, because when you're there, when you're in it, you're like,
You're
man, I'm
normalized.
homesick.
Yeah.
I'm homesick.
Yeah.
I want to get back to cable TV. I want to get back to, you know, HBO. What happened to HBO? We don't have it over here. What about you know, when you start looking at petty shit,
Yeah.
and worrying about petty things. And as a young person, I didn't know that shit ain't important, man. That shit is not what you got right in front of you is where it's at. Because look, you can do anything you want. You can jump on an ice train and go to Italy, go to Spain, go.
Right.
It's all like 2 hours away.
Right.
And you come back to America, you just stuck in your little box, stuck in your little grind, and
your
it's
little
like
cubicle or wherever it is you working in.
Yeah,
you're stuck there, bro. I had to tell myself, I had to train myself to do this. And this is maybe a few years ago, to appreciate the moment, being in the moment. So one of the things I like to do is hike. I like to go on hike and stuff. So
black people don't do hiking, man.
No, not at all. Not at all. That's one thing. And you know, I'm a photographer too, so I like to take my camera, go on hike, you know, do stuff like that. And I remember when I was in the middle of a Paint Branch Trail, and there's a stream, nice size stream on one side. It's a beautiful day. The wind is blowing through the trees and all of that. And there's literally nobody else out here. It's just me. And I stopped for a second and said, you know what? Too many times in my life, I am in a moment thinking about what's next. I need to take some time out to appreciate right here and there. And I got to remind myself this all the time. You're not in pain at this current time, right? You are, no one's like messing with you right now. You got a beautiful environment. Or if I'm sitting here and my daughter is over there trolling some TV show and she is wanting to do, or my son is down here playing the video game thing, or my wife is over there in her office on the other side of the room doing what she's doing. I got to take time this, because this is not promised and it's not permanent. None of it is. I learned that
exactly.
My stepdad died last year, and I learned, like, it's not promised. None of this is promised, right?
And there's beauty in front of you if you just let it in. Like,
let it in.
This atheist mystic I was telling you about, like, when they ask him, like, when you talk about these mystical experience, what are you referring to as an atheist? He goes, no, this is the whole message. What I'm talking about with the mystical experience is whatever experience you're having. That's the mystical part of it. It's, you don't have to go look and search for some heaven or some God or some this or some that. Like, that's not what the mystical experience is all about. The mystical experience is the fact that you paint your perception all the time. You're constantly constructing your reality. It can either be negative, it can be just a black and white, gray, dull, little gloomy life that you're painting. Or that same information, you can paint it to be colorful and beautiful. And
it's a fact.
You know, and he says that's the mystical experience. You don't need God. You don't need this. You don't need all these imaginary things. You don't need all that. All you need, open your freaking eyes. It's right there. You're always there. Yeah, the mystic is right there. Everybody has access to it. You don't have to be a God man. You can. Anybody can have an enlightened mystical experience just by opening your eyes and realizing you can construct this reality yourself. It's just that you have to be willing to let it in and accept whatever it is. Just embrace it. You know,
break that barrier down. Like I remember standing on the beach. It was early in the morning. The sun was coming up over the Caribbean, and I'm standing there. I got my my Sony camera. That's when I first got that. It's my big boy 4K camera. I'm gonna get some shots with this. I remember sitting there just watching as the sun went up, and it was during the windy season. We was there on Belize on the windy season. So all day, every minute, every second of the day, it's like the Marvel character Galactus came from space and put a big old fan right there in the Caribbean Sea, and it's just blowing constantly. And I'm feeling this experience. I'm taking it all in, and I'm going, I can't think of a single place I'd rather be than right here, right now. And if I can just repeat this when I'm in other situations, like, yo, I'm not in pain, nobody's bothering me, I'm not hungry, there's no immediate rush for me to have to do something. I need to take the time to appreciate that. And this whole COVID experience for me, it taught me that, because I learned to love just sitting in my backyard.
There you go. You know, the thing about COVID situation, it forced people to literally sit down and either embrace their own company or not, because a lot of times, I think, in my opinion, at least in my experience, sometimes when you're busy chasing success and you're busy chasing things, it's almost like a way to escape out of
what it is,
problems.
Man.
And what you don't understand is that shit will catch up to you, man. It's like you're trying to run from the smoke, but that smoke is just behind you only because you're running. But once you stop and you're forced to stop, it's gonna still catch up with you. And you have to deal with it. You know, you're gonna have to deal with it. And when I say deal with it, it may not be to make it go away. It could be just to make it go to sleep. Because like if I'm an alcoholic, right? If I'm an alcoholic and I stop drinking, I haven't really solved my alcoholism. Because if I go to the damn bar and start drinking a few tequilas, that shit'll wake right back up.
Right in it again. Back in it again. Yeah.
But at least if I can face it and learn to put that thing to sleep and learn how to categorize things and get my life more organized, it can help, man. And
it helps a lot.
Chasing too much and being on a run, it's not really dealing with it. You're just kind of, you know, I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, man. Dude. And I think it would behoove more of us to just take that moment. I know you're busy. I know you think that all this stuff is super pressing, but I'm here to tell you, last night, when I went to bed last night, I was 18. I woke up this morning 52. I'm telling you, time go like this. You can spend that time chasing, and not really, and then you
never
wake up
getting there.
It's a rat race. It's a rat race. It's you basically in a hamster wheel.
That's what it is.
It's something I don't value it. I do wish I had this mentality earlier in life. I kind of know what I want to do. I haven't always known that, and for people who know me, they thought that I did. I guess I was real good at faking it, but I didn't really know what it was I wanted to do. I knew the things I was interested in, so I engaged in that, right?
Yeah.
But now I have a goal in mind, so it kind of focuses and directs things in that way, and it's really just for me to get a bigger slice of that piece of mind that we were talking about, like that. I can't always promise right now, currently, to be able to appreciate my surroundings for what they are at the time. I have to pick my moments, but I'm trying to get to a point where I can do that at any time. Like,
it's such a balancing act, man. It's especially when you have kids and you have family and you feel pressure. Like when I grew up, I was all about the music, man. Like I was in the 80s. Dude, I even before the Beastie Boys came out, I was writing lyrics and rhymes and performing on stages and in the studio. I even just had a interview the other day, and it's premiered now with Jaquan. He's a hip hop historian.
Yeah,
and we were talking about that. We used to record in the same studio together and stuff like that. And I used to be laser focused on that. That's like what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
but then life happens and you have to pay these bills or you have to make a decision.
Yes,
do I want to keep living in this damn slum, or do I want to get some women and have something to
That's
show a
right.
woman and have something to show
That's
for,
right.
like work for something, you know, have something in life. Do I want to have something in life, or do I want to keep chasing after this dream, you know? And for a young person, you get confused, and I
It's
just
a
went through
pivotal moment. It's a pivotal moment. It
but that's
definitely is.
the problem is, for me, that musical bug never went away.
Same.
Like, it's always been something I felt like I wake up in the morning wanting to write a song, wanted to get into some kind of musical project, get things going, have a dream. But then at the same time, I'm at the cubicle, I'm working, trying to pay these bills, trying to do this and that. You
It's a
got kids, and
balance.
it's like it's just
Balance.
your whole life. And then you can get to a point in your life where you're like, what happened to my life? Like, what happened to my dreams?
Yeah.
Like, I should have just never got married. I should have never went. And you start regretting. But you know, you never really know shit. You know, you don't know what you would have done. That's why you didn't do it.
That's exactly. Exactly.
So
really
it's
don't
better.
know.
I'm just learning in my older age. Just try to find happiness in the moment, because you can't go back in time and get anything back. All you got is the time right now.
Yeah, right
you don't
now.
even know if you're here tomorrow.
You don't know if you're here the next minute.
So I agree with you. Me and you, we
now.
think alike 100%, dude.
Yeah.
Like you really resonate with me. And anyways, man, we're after 2 hours on this conversation. Yeah, man.
Yes, we are.
It was a wonderful conversation, though, bro.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it, and I know the audience is gonna really dig it, man. So I'm gonna go ahead and respect everybody's time, man, and cut it short right now.
Right. I appreciate you inviting me on the show, bro.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming
nice
along, and yes, sir. And I'll do anything I can to help promote your platform and things like that. So just hit me up.
Absolutely.
I'm all about it, man. So anyways, guys, have a good one. Next week we'll have another fascinating interview. Till then, peace.
Peace.